Hello and thanks for being with us. Sinn Fein, an Irish nationalist party, is on course to become the largest party in the Northern Ireland Assembly for the first time in a century. Now, a unionist party has always taken the most seats since the formation of Northern Ireland in 1921. A historic win for Sinn Fein could set the stage for a border poll, a referendum on a unified Ireland. Now, the counting of ballots has been paused and will resume at 9 a.m. Around half of the 90 seats have been filled so far. Well, our senior Ireland correspondent David Blevins sent us this report, and a warning: it does contain flash photography from the start and throughout.
They sense a shift in the governance of Northern Ireland, a political earthquake for the United Kingdom. The result raises the prospect of a vote on Irish unity. Sinn Fein on course to nominate a First Minister.
Well, there's still a way to go yet, David, but obviously it's a very significant election for many reasons, and the people have responded to our positive campaign, a very positive message, and it's now time to get on with forming an executive and delivering for people.
The sea border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the consequence of Brexit, has fractured the unionist vote. But the Democratic Unionists were not conceding defeat. They know there can't be a power-sharing government without them.
We need the long shadow of the protocol removed from the political institutions in Northern Ireland. It is creating untold harm to Northern Ireland, and it needs to be dealt with, and it must be dealt with. And the government need to hear that message very loud and clear.
Sinn Féin did better than it hoped. The DUP not as badly as it feared. One of the big stories of this election is the quiet revolution that's taking place in the middle ground. While it's clear many people are still voting along traditional lines, a growing number are choosing not to vote unionist or nationalist, but for a completely new type of politics here.
Excuse me, folks.
The Alliance Party could double its representation, a clear signal from a weary electorate.
Precious little hope available for people at the minute. It's been a pretty grim couple of years, and the politics has been pretty grim to match it. We just offered people, I think, hope that things could be better, and that's what we want to deliver on.
Brexit had already placed the constitutional question on the table, but will Sinn Féin now demand a referendum on Irish unity?
The conversation around the unity piece has been forthright and to the fore for quite a considerable period of time. That was always going to be the outcome. That's going to continue the other side of this election regardless of the outcome.
If Northern Ireland has elected a First Minister whose party doesn't want Northern Ireland to exist, it's a defining moment. David Blevins, Sky News in Belfast.
Well, let's bring in now the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, who's joining us live from Westminster. Good morning to you, Mrs Zahawi. Thanks for being with us this morning. Let's just pick up on what we saw a little bit in David Blevins' report. Of course, counting is going to resume in Northern Ireland in an hour or so, 2 hours' time. How will a UK government deal with the fact that Sinn Féin are about to be the largest party in the Northern Ireland Assembly?
Well, I think it's important to wait and see the final result. The big focus has to be on making sure we get the protocol to work. I think Sir Geoffrey Donaldson was right on that clip that you just showed. But let's wait and see the final result. Of course, clearly the predictions that Sinn Féin has done well, but of course the unionist parties collectively are also a significant part of this vote, and the other parties as well, the Alliance Party and so on. The important focus, I know, from the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland is to make sure that the protocol works and is fixed as soon as possible, because clearly it is an issue for the people of Northern Ireland, and it's the right thing for us to be focused on.
Let's pick up on a couple of those points. And that protocol, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says that he basically wants it just torn up. Is that something the UK government would do?
Well, as Brandon Lewis, the Northern Ireland Secretary, said, that all options remain on the table. The important thing is to try and make sure we work with the parties in Northern Ireland, but also with the European Commission to make, to make sure that we leave no stone unturned. To try and make it work. But of course, we need to make sure that all our options are available to us, because ultimately, the thing to remember is Northern Ireland is very much part of the family that is the United Kingdom.
I mean, just on that then, I mean, of course, fine words, all options on the table, but you are going to, with whatever decision is made, upset someone in this particular decision, be it the Unionists in Ireland or the EU. Which ones are you going to upset?
Well, I don't think it's a trade-off. I think the important thing is that we put the people of Northern Ireland front and centre. If that is what we do as our priority, and we evidence this, then all sides, whether it's the EU or ourselves, should be working towards making the lives of the people of Northern Ireland much, much better, and for them to see that both the EU and the UK government are working together to get the right outcome. Ultimately, if you put them as the people that we want to make sure we deliver for all communities, then I think it's right to try and work as hard as we can to deliver for them and make the protocol work. That is our priority. That is what the Northern Ireland Secretary will do. But at the same time, he will not compromise on making sure that Northern Ireland is very much part of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, you've had years to do that, so you'll forgive viewers for not being convinced that it can be done. But let's move on to the local elections on this island. The Conservative Party have lost nearly 500 council seats. Simple question, is Boris Johnson still an electoral asset for the Conservatives?
So if you look at the local elections, and you have to remember, we are in mid-term, coming out of the COVID pandemic into a global battle against inflation, with energy prices now spiking because of the illegal war in the Ukraine. Take London, for example. Of course, I was out campaigning in Wandsworth, and we lost Wandsworth, and of course, marginally lost Westminster as well, but we gained Harrow. In London. And so it's important that we listen to our candidates, to our very good councillors, of course, the ones that succeeded and the ones that didn't. But look at other parts of the country. Nuneaton, Newcastle-under-Lyme, first time where the Conservatives in 25 years now have control of Newcastle-under-Lyme. This has not been a good night for Sir Keir Starmer. In terms of going forward. This is a result from a local election where we are in mid-term, out of a pandemic, and of course battling this global battle against inflation. And so it's right that people were concerned. There are some local issues that we have to address, as well as national issues, and we'll listen to those. We will not be complacent. We'll listen to what people are telling us, and we must do better. And of course, you've got the Queen's speech next week, and you'll see what we're bringing forward is a plan for jobs, a plan for the economy, a plan to deal with the backlog in the NHS, and of course make sure that national security, both abroad with war in Europe and at home, are front and centre. Controlling our borders, of course, is very much part of that national security plan.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hear you say that he was an asset, so let me put it to you.
He is an asset, absolutely.
Okay.
I was really trying. I was trying to give you some of the evidence of what I think happened with the local elections. But you look at the way Boris cuts through in places like Nuneaton, places like Newcastle-under-Lyme, other parts of the country as well. Harrow in London.
Other parts of the country, Mr. Zahawi. Sorry, let me just get my next question to you, because other parts of the country is exactly right, isn't it? Because the Tories have been wiped out in Wales, moved into third place in Scotland. So are you happy just being a party for English people?
Right. Well, let's take your point about Scotland. In 2017, Scotland, we had 115 councillors, went up to 275 councillors. So over doubled. So we already had a very high bar in Scotland. Now, when you start from such a high bar, you're bound to look at maybe losing some seats there. But of course, we're not going to be complacent. We want to make sure that we deal with some of the national issues, like the global battle against inflation, and of course the local issues as well. But I don't recognise your characterisation that we've been wiped out in Scotland. That's not true.
No, sorry, wiped out in Wales because you lost the only council that you held. Monmouthshire went to no overall control.
and we will try much harder to make sure that we deal with those issues, including the investment that's going into Wales in things like nuclear, renewables, and of course, other investments that we're making in Wales. This is a mid-term local election that we have to listen to the voters on and have to continue to deliver. But we have a plan for jobs, we have a plan for the economy, a plan to deal with the NHS backlog, and of course, make sure that our borders are secure and deal with war in Europe. And all these things Boris Johnson is dealing with.
And let me just put it to you this way then. After all the issues that have faced this government and the Prime Minister especially being fined and having to deal with politicians watching pornography in the House of Commons, there were some of your colleagues who, up to these elections, were saying that this will be a moment, this will be a test of the Prime Minister and whether we want to go on with him. Are you happy that he's passed that test and you're happy to go on with him? Are all your colleagues in agreement with that?
Well, my message to all of my colleagues, and I stood in 1997 in Erith and Thamesmead in South London, I can tell you that people don't like to vote for split parties, for teams that are divided. And we are strongest when we are united. We've got a Queen's speech next week where we will demonstrate to the nation that the second half of this Parliament is all about dealing with repairing the economy, recovering from COVID, as I've just talked about, the backlog of the NHS and, of course, national security here at home, safer streets and, of course, abroad. All these things we have a plan for. It's, as I say, we're stronger when we are united, and that would be my message to all my colleagues. And you look at where we are making ground in places like the West Midlands, in Nuneaton, and of course Newcastle-under-Lyme. People want to see us focus not on issues like Partygate. By the way, Sir Keir Starmer, I think 1 in 3 of his questions at question time were on parties, and actually neglecting cost of living. And of course, people see the hypocrisy of that now. You've seen the headlines this morning, and of course,
don't
we've
worry,
got to allow.
Mr. Zahawi, I'll put those points to the Labour Party when they are on this programme later.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure. I'm just saying. I'm just reflecting on public opinion. People will look at that and will be uncomfortable with the hypocrisy. And the police have now obviously have to carry out their investigation. And let's see where that ends up.
Yeah, absolutely, we will do. And then finally, then, Mr. Zahawi, you talk about making changes. All the indications are that in the autumn budget there will be some help for the cost of living, but people are really dealing with all of that now. Why is the party putting off trying to help hard-working families who are really struggling to make ends meet through the summer, just to try and do it in the autumn?
Well, I don't think that's correct with respect. We're not holding up with the Chancellor's putting £22 billion in the next 12 months because he recognises that we're in a global battle against inflation, as is in America, as is in the rest of Europe, with high inflation at the moment spiking because of energy costs. 22 billion. So let's try and unpack some of that. You look at the taper relief if people are on universal credit. That's an extra £1,000 for those people because of that relief. The national living wage, that's another £1,000. And then, of course, the national insurance changes he made in terms of the threshold, that's another £330 a year for the most people who are under pressure because of high energy costs, because of high utility bills. And of course, we'll continue to review that, continue to look at that. £1 billion going to local government who know who those people are, who are struggling with their weekly shop, who are struggling with their utility bills.
Okay, Mr.
All that is 22 billion in 12 months because the Chancellor is well aware of the pressure that people are under at the moment because of the spike in energy costs and, of course, the global fight against inflation.
Yes, it's a hell of a list of things, though, isn't it, Mr. Zahawi? And it's very, very expensive. I mean, reports from the Governor of the Bank of England saying that we're heading towards recession. People's bank balances really struggling to make ends meet. Where are you on this idea of a windfall tax on energy firms? We saw Shell's profits the other day. Huge.
So I think a couple of things on that. One, we need to make sure we get the investment in our gas assets in the North Sea, because clearly...
Mr. Zahawi, you know that the bosses of ththese companies have said they will keep investing even if they are taxed more.
Right, so we need to make sure that investment happens. Both Shell and BP... well, just hear me out a second. Both Shell and BP have announced, I know Shell, 25 billion in renewables, BP a similar number in hydrogen and in renewables to meet those important targets of net zero by 2050 to make sure that we preserve this precious planet. And of course, one last thing to remember is both Shell and BP pay double the corporation tax that other companies pay. So corporation tax for them is about 40% at the moment. If we want that investment, if we want in renewables, in, of course, getting our gas assets so that actually we don't rely on other countries for the gas that we're going to need anyway. Even if you're going to, we're going to move to a hydrogen economy, you still need gas in that economy. Those are the things that are important. And, of course, the help that we are putting in, 22 billion over the next 12 months. All of that is the right thing to do. When the pandemic hit, both Shell and BP lost billions of pounds. That is pensioners' money. That is pension funds. Pensioners rely on those profits to be able to make sure that they can live well and pay for the things they need to pay for. So we have to look at this in the round and be responsible. We have a plan for the economy. We have a plan for jobs. Labour doesn't.
OK, Mr Zahawi, we do appreciate your time this morning and putting your point across. Really good to talk to you.
Great to talk to you.
Thank you. Right, now let's move to the war in Ukraine. And Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says that diplomatic efforts are underway to save the remaining fighters who are still holed up inside the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol. Let's bring in our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, who's joining us from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, this morning. Good morning to you, Deborah. So bring us up to speed. What do we know about what's happening right now in Mariupol around Azovstal?
Well, it's still this incredible standoff at that plant. It's become really a symbol of Ukraine's resistance, given that Mariupol, the surrounding city, has been at the heart of the war in terms of bombardments, besieging, civilians killed. And yet, this hardcore, this final core of Ukrainian fighters holed up in the Azovstal steelworks have managed to endure this Russian pressure. They've resisted Russian offers to surrender, to walk out. There's no trust on either side as well, it must be said, in terms of trying to end this siege. And also in the steelworks, you have had, since the beginning of the war, frankly, civilians sheltering there. The steelworks itself is this vast complex that stretches over more than 4 square miles. And underneath the ground, there is effectively a city of tunnels, of reinforced bunkers. You couldn't design a better fortress. And there was also a lot of stores under there to enable people to shelter from the bombardments, which is what they've done. But of course, those stores have run out. Food supply is very, very limited. And that's why there has been this critical effort from the highest level of the international community, including the head of the United Nations. The Red Cross is involved. The Pope is involved, trying, first of all, to extract civilians. And we did have, remarkably, 50 more women, children and elderly evacuating from the rubble of that plant yesterday. The idea to get all of the remaining civilians, that we don't know exactly how many more there could be, probably a few dozen. Then there are also hundreds of wounded Ukrainian fighters there. Trying to get them out as well is of an urgent priority. And as well as that, the Ukrainian president has said that there are negotiations underway to try to get the remaining Ukrainian fighters out of there. They have withstood, as I've said, the Russian offensive, but they've also ensured that Russia has not been able fully to declare victory over Mariupol, and that's clearly an irritation. And it's also potentially something that Russia might want to achieve by the 9th of May, which is Monday, the annual Victory Day in Moscow. That would be a symbolic moment to be able to declare that. But equally, for the Ukrainians, the longer they're able to hold out there, the more they're able to frustrate Russia's plans.
Absolutely right. Not long to go until the 9th of May. Deborah in Kyiv, thank you so much for that. Now, of course, a war zone is no place for the vulnerable and no place for the sick. And at a cancer ward of Ukrainian Children's Hospital, doctors there are planning an evacuation. Well, our Katerina Vitozzi spent time with some children there who have cancer and need to receive life-saving treatment. She sent us this from the western Ukrainian city of Lviv.
Inside Lviv's Children's Hospital, doctors are planning an operation that is as delicate as it is tough. They've tried to protect patients, taping windows to stop them shattering in shelling. But now they will attempt the almost impossible, a group evacuation across international borders from the cancer ward.
We are responsible for these kids, yes. This is 400 kids, so we're responsible for them. So yes, of course.
A lot of pressure.
Yes, there is a pressure.
And it has to happen fast. War has disrupted drug supply for those that need it most.
Домой хочется, скучает по дому. У нас там друзья, папа, бабушки, да? Парень.
Alina Babic is 7 and has been in and out of hospital for months, being treated for a malignant brain tumour.
Мы лечились в Ахмадите с декабря месяца. Была операция, потом была лучевая терапия, потом началась война. Нас сюда эвакуировали 8 марта. И куда везут, туда мы и едем, да, Блиц?
Ukraine right now is no place for the vulnerable.
Do you need to go now? Okay.
For the third time today, there's an air raid warning. The sick scramble to the basement shelter, one of the strangest we've ever seen. The hospital has a disused spa in the basement, built originally for high-ranking Soviet officials. Saunas and a swimming pool, built as luxuries for Russian leaders, now protect terrified families.
Да, из тех всех, которые самые безопасные, это самые безопасные. Хотя в безопасности сейчас никто себя не чувствует нигде, наверное.
This is why they have to leave. But on evacuation day, things are incredibly tense.
We've got about 5 minutes until the convoy is meant to leave now, and as you can see, the families, they're ready, they're packed, but inside there's still phone calls, there's still messages to try and work out actually where eventually these families and these children are going to end up.
Beyond a first stop at a clinic in Poland, families still don't know what hospital, what country they will be taken to.
You feel afraid?
Боюсь. Неизвестность.
Why are you feeling so frightened?
Просто боюсь.
War has stripped families of certainty, of control, of each other. Wherever they go, fathers are unable to travel. Men of fighting age cannot leave Ukraine.
Надіємося, що на краще, що все буде добре. Всі будуть щасливі. Хоча важко, але все буде добре.
These are precious final moments. It's heartbreaking. But vital. Finally, everyone is on board. Families start a journey that will make them refugees, but could save their lives. Katerina Potocki, Sky News in Lviv, Ukraine.
Well, this weekend we're going to bring you a new documentary all about the refugee crisis in Ukraine caused by the war. You can watch it for the first time today at 3:30, and there, as you can see, the other timings of it are on your screen right now. Now, it is a deal said to be worth up to £4 billion. The US businessman, Todd Boehly, has signed an agreement to buy Chelsea Football Club in a takeover that will see the end of Roman Abramovich's time in charge. Now, Chelsea was put up for sale by Mr Abramovich just days before he was sanctioned by the UK government for his ties to President Vladimir Putin. Well, our reporter Sadia Chowdhury is outside the Chelsea Stadium at Stamford Bridge this morning. For more on this, Sadia, thanks for being with us again. So, have we finally come to a conclusion of this Chelsea sale?
Yeah, and it does bring to an end the Abramovich era, as you say, but it also brings to an end those special measures that Chelsea are having to operate under, which ban it from buying new players or renewing existing contracts, which at this particular time of the season is of importance. Now, as you say, the deal is worth £4.25 billion, and it means Chelsea goes to a consortium led by the American billionaire Todd Boehly. He owns the Major League Baseball side LA Dodgers, and he's in the country right now and is expected to be at the game this afternoon when Chelsea play against Wolves. Now, if you remember, at the start of March, Roman Abramovich agreed to sell the club, and just after that he was sanctioned by the UK government for having ties to President Vladimir Putin of Russia. Now, that led to a flurry of investors trying to buy this club, but also questions about where that money would go. Roman Abramovich has said that the proceeds would go to charity, but there was a question over a £1.5 billion loan that Chelsea Football Club owes to Abramovich, and questions over whether or not the new owners would have to pay that. We can read out a statement from Chelsea Football Club which hopes to clarify that. I'll read it out to you now. It says £2.5 billion will be applied to purchase the shares in the club, and such proceeds will be deposited into a frozen UK bank account with the intention to donate 100% to charitable causes, as confirmed by Roman Abramovich. UK government approval will be required for the proceeds to be transferred from the UK bank account. Now, that implies that none of that money will go to Abramovich. And for the deal to go through, it needs both the Premier League and UK government approval. And Chelsea Football Club will be hoping that that happens very quickly, because on the 31st of May, that licence that it's currently operating under will expire. And of course, we know the June transfer window opens on the 10th of June, and Chelsea will be hoping to make good use of that this summer.
Let's return to our top story, Sinn Fein, an Irish nationalist party. They're on course to become the largest party in the Northern Ireland Assembly for the first time in a century. Now, a historic win for Sinn Fein could set the stage for a border poll, a referendum on a unified Ireland. Well, earlier, I was able to speak to the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, on what all of this could mean for the future of the Northern Ireland Protocol.
All options remain on the table. The important thing is to try and make sure we work with the parties in Northern Ireland, but also with the European Commission to make to make sure that we leave no stone unturned to try and make it work. But of course, we need to make sure that all our options are available to us, because ultimately, the thing to remember is Northern Ireland is very much part of the family that is the United Kingdom.
Let's bring in our political correspondent, Rob Powell, is joining us now live from Westminster. Hello again to you, Rob. So Nadeem Zahawi there saying that all options are on the table, but I did put it to him, he's going to have to upset someone, and he seemed to still try and plough a middle path.
Yeah, and I think specifically you'd asked him a question when he said all options were on the table of whether the government could consider ripping up the Northern Ireland Protocol entirely. So clearly that nuclear option is still there. That is what the DUP have been demanding. They, of course, collapsed power sharing in Stormont over the Northern Ireland Protocol, that part of the Brexit deal that basically puts a trade border down the Irish Sea between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. I think the difficulty is, and we'll have to wait, we may get an indication in the Queen's speech next week when the government lays out its plans for legislation for the coming session. We may get an indication in that of what the government intends to do. But as you suggest there, I think if it moves towards doing something the DUP would like and rewriting the Brexit deal, parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol on its own, what it risks doing is angering Sinn Fein, which by that point most likely will be the largest party in the devolved assembly. And they have said that the Northern Ireland Protocol needs to be adhered to. So I think Brexit and politics in Northern Ireland once again coming into a tricky mix. Nadeem Zahawi also, when he was asked about the results in England, Scotland and Wales and disappointing results and losses for the Conservatives, insisted he still thought Boris Johnson was an electoral asset, but did also said they needed to listen to councillors on local and national issues and needed to do better.
Absolutely right. OK, Rob, for now, thank you so much for that. Well, let's get some more on the situation in Northern Ireland and bringing the editor of the political website. Apologies, actually, the line to Mick Fealty is not quite ready yet, so let's move on to some other news quickly. And I think we're going to go now to the situation in Sri Lanka. Now, there have been weeks of protests there, and the president has just declared a state of emergency. Now, while this has been happening, the former energy minister has told us here at Sky News that his country is about to run out of food and fuel. Now, the protests have been attempted to be put down by police who used tear gas and water cannon in an effort to break up the crowds. Now, people in Sri Lanka all across the country are hugely angry at a rise in the cost of everyday goods. Some are up at least 30% on the cost of last year. Now, the price of fuel has also soared. Petrol is said to be up 90%, and the price of diesel, well, that's up 150%. and 38%. Now, the country's current finance minister said that £3.2 billion is going to be needed to continue importing daily essentials. Let's bring in Paul Kelso, who is live for us in the Sri Lankan capital, Colombo. So, Paul, Sri Lanka really going through economic turmoil right now. What are people that you've been able to speak to there telling you about the situation in the country?
Well, heart of the opposition to the government, particularly to the President and the Prime Minister, who are brothers, is here just in front of the President's office. That's the old Parliament building behind me there. This camp has been here for a month now, and they are demanding change because Sri Lanka is sliding into an economic crisis. Its foreign currency reserves are almost exhausted, and food and fuel could be the next things to run out. They've woken up this morning in a state of emergency as the President seeks to suppress domestic protests that yesterday saw thousands of people take to the streets for a general strike.
Paul, that general strike has been called, and we've seen from some of those that you have spoken to that the problems in Sri Lanka have just been mounting and mounting for years. I mean, it's worth remembering, of course, that the government of Sri Lanka has been in a pretty fragile position since Rajapaksa was ejected.
Yes. This situation has been building for, some will tell you, many years, but it has come to a head in the last year under the leadership of the Rajapaksa brothers. Not just two of them, there were four in cabinet at one point, as well as one of their sons. Many people see this as a nepotistic family firm rather than a true expression of the democratic will of the Sri Lankan people. The primary problem has been the winding down, the depletion of foreign currency reserves. There have been several reasons for that. The government cut taxes in a populist move intending to spread prosperity. What it did, of course, was reduce government reserves just as COVID hit. That's destroyed the tourism industry here, and there's been a huge impact on agriculture too as a result of a decision to cut fertiliser supplies. All of that has seen food and fuel become rise in price and become short on the streets, and it's brought thousands out to protest against this administration.
On a national day of action, this is how police greeted protesters at Sri Lanka's parliament. They want the president and his brother, the Prime Minister, to resign. The country faces an economic and political crisis, and the anger that brought all sections of Sri Lankan society to the streets will not be easily swept aside.
This is the police line outside the Sri Lankan parliament where protests have been taking place for more than 24 hours now. Tensions have risen through the afternoon and the police used tear gas and these water cannons to push the crowds back. That worked for a while. Many people are not ready to go yet.
This is one reason they're protesting. Fuel shortages are a daily routine here. Petrol and diesel a precious commodity that the former energy minister, sacked for criticising government policy, says Sri Lanka may soon be unable to afford.
In near future, we have a risk of being run out of all kinds of fuel.
What would be the consequences for the people?
Well, imagine a situation, man without blood, economy would die. Situation is terrible. Basically, Sri Lanka right now has no foreign currency reserves whatsoever. In coming months, definitely there will be a food shortage.
How soon could Sri Lanka start to run out of food?
1 to 2 months.
It's a frightening prospect.
Of course, yes. Very frightening.
The focus of public anger is President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Go home Gota is the slogan of the opposition movement, and there's been a protest camp outside his office for the past month, drawing young and old, poor and professional, all appalled at their country's descent.
People can't afford to get their basic medicines, and not even at a price which they're willing to pay. There's no medicines available. At hospitals, they turn back people saying, go get the medicines from the pharmacies, and even if they go to a pharmacy, there's no medicines available.
I believe that this is going to affect every single one of us eventually, and because of the nepotism, Sri Lanka has faced so much of issues, and the situation we are in right now is due to the mismanagement of our leaders.
The president has now declared a state of emergency to control protests, but only outside help will stop the economy imploding.
What's really striking, talking to the people here in the protest camp and around Colombo and in the hill country where we've spent a couple of days, is just how eager they are that the dire strait Sri Lanka is in is broadcast to the world. We have been asked to let people know what is happening and to express the anger across the political spectrum. The government, now this state of emergency that's been declared, will give the President and the Prime Minister more power to suppress the protests we've just seen there. But if Sri Lanka is to get through this, it is going to need outside help. You might be able to make out the cranes at the Colombo port complex behind me there. Beyond that is the oil terminal. Sri Lanka has less than $50 million of usable reserves it can use to buy commodities. That's not even close to enough to pay for a single tanker of fuel to keep the economy moving. So if Sri Lanka is to get through this crisis and avoid a real descent into hardship, it's going to come through that port. It's going to need the outside world to help, and that is going to need people to look beyond the domestic disputes that is causing such frustration and anger on the streets here.
Absolutely. OK, Paul, really appreciate the reporting. Thank you for that. Now, North Korea is reported to have fired yet another ballistic missile. The Japanese Coast Guard says that the missile fell into the sea. North Korea last tested a weapon on Wednesday. At least 22 people have been killed and dozens have been injured after a gas leak caused an explosion at a hotel in Cuba. The blast destroyed the outer walls of the Havana hotel. A child is reported to be among the dead. Cuba's president called the incident a tragic accident. A rescue operation is underway to try and find anyone still trapped. All right, let's return to the Northern Ireland Assembly election and bring in the editor of the political website Slugger O'Toole, Mick Fealty, for his thoughts on what's happening in Northern Ireland right now. Good morning to you, Mick. Thanks for being with us here on Sky News. So, look, counting is due to get underway in about an hour and 15 minutes' time. What are your thoughts on what we'll see come out of the results today?
Yeah, well, just in context, we have a particular arduous form of proportional representation. So counting actually started yesterday. So we've got some of the headline figures. We know really quite a substantial amount about the various fortunes of the different parties. And we know really that what we thought was going to be true at the very beginning of the campaign is that it was Sinn Féin's night. But the only thing that surprised us, I think, was the scale of the gap now between them in terms of the proportion of votes and the SDLP. So you can see there from your screen, 29%, 23%. You go back 5 years to the equivalent election, there was only 1 percentage point separating the two, and the DUP was 1 point ahead of Sinn Féin. So this is quite a substantial. It's not just that Sinn Féin has beaten the DUP, it has beaten the DUP quite substantially. And I think there will be some consequences. Another thing you'll see if you go further down that table, though, is that what's happened in the middle is there is a consolidation of the vote around the Alliance Party, which cost the Green Party 2 seats, broadly in that kind of same territory. It's also been disastrous for the nationalist SDLP. That's the party of John Hume, and slightly less so, I think, for the David Trimble's old party, the Ulster Unionists there, whose vote proportion held up and who've had some good results in some places and disasters in others. But what you're seeing there is now three broad sections of the community now. You've got the union. Sorry to rush
you, Mick, but we don't have loads of time. I did want to get you another question really quickly about the Alliance Party, because you'll have to explain to our viewers as quickly as you can that obviously the First Minister and Deputy First Minister are chosen from the two communities in Ireland, but seeing this Alliance Party do so well, is there any talk about trying to change how those rules work? I mean, the Alliance Party could at one point make its way into second place, couldn't it?
No, absolutely. And there is talk about it. There has been talk about it. In the terms of the Good Friday Agreement itself, after 5 years, there was supposed to be a substantive review. It's never happened. What's really happened is that the two big parties have negotiated a settlement that keeps them in power almost permanently. And remember this, although the designations are going to change, so if these guys ever take office under these terms, the terms of this election, Sinn Fein will be the First Minister and DUP the Deputy First Minister. These are twin bosses. They're tied together like Siamese twins. One of them can't blow their nose without the other one's permission. So in many respects, although the cosmetics of the situation have changed, the substantial political reality hasn't. And the Alliance Party's issue is it's a very long way back from challenging either of those two big beasts.
Yeah, the impasse is not going to be broken just yet, is it? Very interesting times ahead. OK, Mick, sorry, we have to cut it short there, but thank you so much for being with us this morning. We'll speak to you, I'm sure, in the next few days. All right, let's take a look at the papers this morning. Afua and Dawn are with us again. Hello again to you, Afua and Dawn. Lovely to see you in my big screen. All right, let's start off with the front page of the Express. Dawn, this is one for you. I'll just read it out. Bullish Boris back on track as Red Wall keeps faith. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well done. Kamali, this is... I picked this one up because it's very interesting. The difference that the newspapers have treated the story about the Tories losing seats in London and the South. And as you've just read out, the Express is rah-rah Boris, as they always are. I mean, Boris would literally have to kill somebody before they were negative about him. Meanwhile, if you go over to The Guardian, it's Johnson blamed for Tory election woes. But I picked these stories because they are both using pictures of Boris Johnson at a visit to a school yesterday, Field End Primary School, in his Uxbridge and Ruislip constituency, where he spent time with a group of 5- and 6-year-olds drawing pictures of the Queen for her Jubilee. And these are all going to be displayed on the wall. And, you know, he signed his. And, you know, frankly, the kids' pictures were better. Just saying that, just putting that one out there. But that was interesting. But I mean, it is interesting the way it's all treated differently, and it's sort of like, you know, he's emboldened as the Red Wall voters stick by him, and then it's like, but in the South it's not maybe so good. But the pictures I love of him with the kids and as I said, there's one in the Express of him looking, oh, this is my picture, aren't I great? And then the Guardian have used from the same set of him going, oh, head in hands like that. So it's just the difference in the way this election is being reported. You can take pretty much whatever you want from it, but basically it was a bit of a disaster, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, perhaps. I mean, Nadine Zahawi didn't think it was quite a disaster. I've got the pictures here. Yeah, you've got Boris Johnson on the Express, hands on hips, double teapotting, and then in the Guardian, here we go. There we go. I think we can probably see that there, Boris Johnson with his head in his hands. That's also another... The picture is there on the front page of the FT as well. It really is a really great telling of the story of the night from two different outlets. All right, let's carry on then. Afua, we're going to go inside The Guardian now, page 2. This is all about COVID vaccinations. Tell us why this story jumped out at you.
Well, yeah, so this is a story about COVID vaccinations for younger people. And The Guardian reporting that the JCVI has said that younger people may not need a 4th vaccine. So we did have a spring booster program, which was for over 75,000 people who are more vulnerable. There's talk of an autumn booster program as well, perhaps for the same age group. But yes, this story is saying that healthier young people in the UK may never be offered another COVID jab after having the first 2 and then the booster. Saying that because of the variants and the vaccines that are around at the moment, people who have, I quote, not yet reached middle age, who are healthier and younger, may not ever need this 4th boost of vaccine. Also, the JCVI is saying, quite interestingly, towards the end of this article, that an infection would probably give a younger person the same number of antibodies and the same amount of protection, that a vaccine would offer. Not saying that younger people should go out and deliberately get infected, but basically saying that that level of protection is the same that you would get from a vaccine. So it looks like younger people, those who haven't reached middle age yet, probably won't be offered a 4th COVID vaccine.
Yeah, and Dawn, just coming on that, we've only got about a minute and a half left until we have to go to break, but you are back next hour. And this about young people and COVID jabs, it's not bad news, it's pretty good news. We needed some good news about the pandemic, because there was a line as well the other day that case numbers are coming down dramatically.
Absolutely. It does appear, Kamali, to be good news all around. Case numbers are coming down, and You know, the other side of that is, oh, we're not testing ourselves as much, but hospitalisations are coming down, deaths are coming down slowly, and, you know, there are sadly still people dying. We must never forget so many families have suffered. And I do wonder, going back to the election again, how much the way that the government handled COVID has to do with it. I don't think it's so much Partygate and Beergate. It's the cost of living, and I think the way that the COVID pandemic was handled by the Conservative government at the moment. But there is good news, and it's a sunny Saturday morning, so it's really nice to have something nice to talk about for a while.
Yeah, exactly, not have that existential dread hanging over us of a pandemic. Guys, thank you.